I'm curious, Kimberly, can you
Hmm.
tell us, like, geographically where most of your concerning reports come from? Or is it just kind of spread across the US kind of equally? Or are there some parts of the country where it seems to be worse?
Mm, great question. I mean, I think that just in general, I mean, Earth has reviews from 48 states plus Hawaii. So I'm really grateful to see the geographic stretch. However, Earth technically works best in geographic density, right? It is more powerful for us to have 1,000 reviews in one city than to technically have 10,000 spread across 50 states, right? Because with
Okay.
those 1,000 reviews, we can get some really good information that allows us to really push for change. We have the most reviews from the state of California, right, as of now, but we do find that our reviews are centered in geographic cities. So, New York City being one of our top cities, New Orleans is also one of our top cities. In California, LA and Sacramento are our top areas, with the Bay Area being the third. We also skew heavily in the DC metro area and Detroit, Chicago coming in there, and then Atlanta. And so, really thinking about our pockets, we're really trying to dig into Houston to get some more presence there. And so, one of the things that's really been interesting is just seeing in places, let's say in New York City, where we actually see women who are educated, higher socioeconomic status, leaving reviews versus other cities where we tend to have a different population, which may be a lower income population leaving reviews. And those nuances about treatment really aren't much different, right? And for
Okay.
me, the like what disturbs me, among the many things that disturbs me when I read Earth reviews, is seeing that across socioeconomics and geographic areas, we are still stuck in those stereotypes about Black women, still questions about, are you married? Still questions, assumptions that you're on WIC. It's like, I mean, this is just happening across the board. So I think those types of nuances are definitely, more telling to me. And then geographically, I think what we see is, especially in our Southeast, like our Atlanta reviews, like there's a niceness to the nastiness that I think, like, New Yorkers are just direct, right? It's just, you're just going to get it. But there's actually a niceness to the nastiness that's really interesting when we look at our reviews in the Southeast, where everybody is supposed to be nice, where it's like, okay. It's just the way that it happens can be very
Hmm.
different. And so that's been interesting to see geographically. Certainly in New York City, we've seen a lot more inductions than I would say other cities where people are being induced without being clear about why. So those are some of the key distinctions that I would say, both geographically and also just in general, which for me has been what's been the same regardless.
Hmm. So, when you're looking in a city, do you see differences like between hospitals, or do all of the hospitals seem to have similar levels of problems and bad reviews? Or do you see like differences where one hospital seems to be doing better and the another one has a worse track record, or are they all just kind of bad across the board?
Yeah, it depends. I would say that, more of the hospitals that have implemented some sort of midwifery model of care,
Mm.
even if it's within a hospital setting, those reviews are always better. I
Okay.
mean, just the folks, and this happens, I think, more in California, folks who have been allowed to birth with a midwife, even at a hospital, which can happen in some places, have generally had much better experiences, which is based on what we know, right? Just the
Right.
way that that model is set up, the care, etc. So that's one thing that we can see. I would say that different hospitals are failing people differently, right? But it's still systemic failure, right? And so nobody is consistently getting 5-star reviews across the board, but the ways that they may be doing it, the ways that they are failing Black birthing people can be very different. Some of it is very blatant, some may be, questions. So, for example, when you go through our birthing review, you're asked about the doctors, nurses, and lactation consultants. So one of the things that's interesting, we ask a question. One, how soon did lactation consultant visit you? Was it within 24 hours? How much time did they spend with you? And were you told about these things? Some of them like colostrum, cluster feeding, signs of insufficient latch, signs of low milk supply. things that you really should know. I mean, basics. And the places where we see people don't know about any of those things before they've been discharged, for me, that's one of my key, you failed here, because that is based on a stereotype and an assumption. And if Black birthing people and Brown folks are not leaving with basic knowledge about breastfeeding, how are they meant to succeed? So, I look at the review, not just what happened on the birth side, but also the breastfeeding side as part of how they're being overall recommended. And nobody is getting it right on both sides of that equation. And that's deeply troubling. Obviously, much better experiences from people who've had doulas come in with them, and so many reviews where they're like, if you're going to go here, make sure you have a doula. If you don't birth here without a doula, or my doula helped me have a good experience. And so lots of that as well.
So it sounds like, in general, if you're a Black birthing family or brown birthing family, if your hospital doesn't have midwives or the midwives aren't really practicing in the true midwifery model of care, that could be a red flag. And if they're not providing adequate lactation care to Black families, that's another big red flag.
Big red flag.
So ask other Black families and look at the reviews for the lactation specific stuff.
I think that's telling, because for
Yeah.
me, how we care for Black mothers and birthing individuals as well as their infants is really important to me, right? And so we know that lactation and body feeding is related to the birthing person's health as well as the infant health. Now you got two people involved here. And so for me, when that is failing, that is a red flag. So that's important in terms of the overall care that you're receiving during that process.